Hello and welcome to this video on the major cards buff. Now this video is gonna be talking about the PvE application of the major cards buff. It's gonna be explaining why it's an important buff and how to proc it, and then my thoughts on the community and the general feedback that people are giving to new players. So I'm gonna start off by explaining how the buff works and what it does. Now, here we see the buff and the 5Ps. It gives 258 spell damage or weapon damage, and this is not the same as what a 5P set would give. Now, I like to compare it to Juliana's. If I can just put it on, there we go. Now we see them side by side. Juliana's and Hunning's Rage are the two sets that we call the gold standard for DPS. Now these are the two sets that are the bare minimum that you need to surpass to be considered for testing, I'd say. So if you look at any set with a 5-piece that might give spell damage, we look at the up times and see how does it compare to Juliana's, or a stamina set would be compared to Hunning's Rage. Now Hunning's Rage is the exact same buffs, just weapon damage, weapon critical and stamina. Now Olorime gives almost the same as Juliana's. Now it's quite a bit lower, it's around 80 to 90% of what Juliana's gives. So this means it's around 80 to 90% of a 5-piece. Now in PvE, if you proc this set on all 8 DDs, which is what you use in a trial, or most trials, you'll be having almost 7 5-pieces worth of DPS. Now this is massive. If you can have 100% uptime from a single user of the major courage buff, you're basically getting 7 free 5-pieces. This is a huge buff, and this is why I think this buff is important to discuss, and also why you have to use it as a healer in PvE content. Now there are two ways to proc the major cards buff. On the right we see spell power cure, the opposite buff to the Olorime buff I showed just before. Now spell power cure is different in a lot of ways to Olorime, but the most important thing about spell power cure is that it is essentially free. If you're a free to play player, you will get access to DLC dungeons at given times when SOS gives you a free subscription. You can use this time to get the spell power cure set. This means that every single player in the game has access to spell power cure. Now if you're subscribed, you'll also be able to farm the set in the White Gold Tower dungeon at any given time. On the other side, Olorime is hard locked behind the Somerset expansion, which you have to go and purchase even if you are subscribed. And this means that if you do not have access to Olorime, this video is not really for you. This means that if you don't own the Somerset expansion, you should, as a PvE healer, I would even say a PvP healer in some scenarios, be using spell power cure. And I think my advice is that you go and farm it as quickly as possible, and that if you feel like it, roll it out and use it in all content. It is absolutely still the best set that you have to give to you, or the best buff you have access to, and you should be using it. Now I'm gonna quickly show how the two sets are different. So we have Olorime right here. Now Olorime procs by throwing ground AoEs, and these can be any ground AoE that procs the buff. Now there are some ground AoEs that don't, but I'm gonna show a couple that does. Now this includes shots. Do you see me aiming? And you see it land here. Now the clock ticking shows when I can reapply the buff. Now Ritual procs it as well. Now there's some AoEs that don't proc them exactly where you want them to, and one of them is the destruction wall. Now, see me procking it, and it lands by the feet of the skeleton. Now this can land really any point on the path, and I don't recommend procking it with it. Now this buff can proc from healing springs as well, and there are lots of ground AoEs that can proc it. Channel focus on a Templar, and I could go on for days. Now spell parkour on the other hand works by healing. This means that it's more of a passive set. Now the issue with spell parkour is that it can only be held up at 6 people at any given time. This means that in a 12-man group in a trial, you'll as a single user only be able to keep a 50% uptime. If you have 2 users, they're spent on thousands of passes in all the trials except for the Somerset trials, and the maximum uptime you'll ever reach on all DDs is somewhere from 80 to 90%. This is really the uptime that you're going to be realistically hitting in most fights with 2 use of a spell parkour. Olorime on the other hand has shown from a single user to be upwards of 97, 95 to 100% in less experienced groups, somewhere between 80 to 90, which is the same as 2 spell parkour users, and this is why Olorime is really powerful, because it allows an extra set. You can reach the same uptime as 2 sets. Now I'm quickly going to show you a pass of Olorime reaching the uptimes that I claimed it could. So I'm gonna go over this Samaja fight that was done last patch around October. So we go into the healing done, and we look at our DDs. Now this is a DD. His major courage uptime was 97%. Another DD, 98%. Another DD, 97%, and I'll go through 92, 97, myself, so that would be 100. This is a tank, this is a DD. Now he died, so the uptimes are a bit lower, and the same goes here. What else? Uptimes are based. This is a tank again, tank and pet. So what I showed here was that we had a couple of people a bit below 90%, but this was me solo using Olorime with Ebon in this pass, and we had 97% average on DDs. Now my conclusion and advice is that Olorime in any PvE content, be this 4-man or 12-man, is going to be the best set. It's going to be giving the best uptimes, and it's going to be the most successful set. And this is any realistic group, so this I do not take into account the most extreme POC scenarios, because I do not believe that in these scenarios major courage matters. And I would recommend, if you are in a scenario where spell parkour is better than Olorime, spell parkour or the major courage buff is not going to matter in clearing the trial, and you'd be better off using a set like Krakenak's Hope. So this means there are no PvE scenarios where spell parkour is going to be better than Olorime. So what I think is important is to talk a bit about how you as a community give advice, because I think when you look at how you give advice as a DD, DDs will often have these weird off meta builds, but people admit that it is off meta. So whenever you see a guy post on Reddit or the forums and asking for advice, you'll see people saying, this is what the majority of people use, and they'll link an LCAS guide or something like it. but we don't see this with healers, and it absolutely baffles me that when it comes to tanking advice and when it comes to damage dealer advice, you can give off-meta advice. So you can say, well, in this certain scenario, I use this weird off-meta Dragon Knight build with heavy attacks, but I will admit that it's not the best and it's not what the majority uses. I believe when you give advice, you should not only take into account your own situation, but you should think, what advice can I give to this person that is likely to help them the most? So when a new, fresh player goes and asks for advice, why would you tell them to use something that they will have to change in a couple of weeks? I simply don't understand it. Now, you might disagree that there are no scenarios where Spellpark is better. Now, I've given you the scenario. If you have two Olorime users with jawls that cannot reach 80 to 90%, yes, then Spellpark Cure will be better. But these are very, very, very specific scenarios that is not within what I would say realistic expectations. And really, when you give advice, you should not give advice based on a 1 in 1,000 run. You should give advice on what sort of content is he realistically going to play. And I think it's wrong. Now, I checked the prices of Drugawax today on EU, and if you want to gold out 7 pieces of light armor, not giving enchants or anything, you'll have to pay over 225,000 gold. This is a huge amount to a new player, not counting in the hours it will take to farm Spellpower Gear. So you're asking a player to go into a dungeon and farm it for 10 hours, maybe waste his transmute stones, then spend a huge sum of money to gold out this set, maybe. We don't know if he golds it out, but still. And then in a couple of weeks, he will have to then go and do the exact same process over again. I believe this is wrong. I believe that you're doing people a massive disservice by giving the wrong advice. And I believe now that a couple of months ago, or 6 months ago, when Olorime came out, yeah, it was a new set and we needed statistics and we needed to test the set and prove if it really was better. But I think there is no doubt now that Olorime is a better set. And I believe it's time to move on and accept this. Now, I'm not going to tell anyone what to do with it. If you're an Spellpower Cure user and you believe this is the best set for you, go ahead. But I'm just talking about these people putting up a Reddit post or a forum post or asking in a guild chat, what should I go and farm? If you tell them Spellpower Cure, you're not giving them a fair chance. You're essentially wasting their time, wasting your own time, wasting the time of their raid group maybe. And I think it's not fair. I think it's time that we as a healer community move on and we stop debating this. And I hope you'll take my words into account when you next time go and recommend a set for major cards, and you go and tell people the truth that in the vast majority of scenarios in PvE, you'll be better off with Olorime. This is the set used by almost all guilds and pod groups to proc major courage, and this is what you will have the most success with in future, and this is why you should go and spend your gold and your money and your time. And then you can tell them that, if you've got a couple of extra hours and some extra gold to spend, and you do a lot of extreme POC runs with very new players in extreme hyperbolical scenarios, there might just be one day when Spellpower Cure is better, and it might be a good idea to have the set by then. I'd say instead, go make a gold set of Krakenark's Hope, because this set will be better off in that go, and it will also be better off in other scenarios when you are viping around, maybe training a new tactic. I hope you take my words into account next time, and if you disagree with my opinion, then tell me in the comments, and if you really disagree, then tell me in game.